Welcome to this new episode of the series, From Cairo to Abu Simbel. In this episode, we visit the famous Egyptian museum in Cairo.
This is a very nice museum, Jack. I think one of the most beautiful museums in the world when it comes to Egyptian antiquities.
Hatshepsut, this is true. But the new museum will open soon, near the pyramids. A large number of the antiquities will be exhibited there. It is now March 2024. If you want to visit in the future the Cairo Museum, look online to see which museum is best to go to.
This is true and important. Let's go inside.
Once inside, we immediately encounter a huge statue of Ramses II.
Beautiful.
There is so much to see here, we cannot explain or describe everything that passes by. The film would last hours. There is so much beauty on display here.
The big black statue is from Cairo. He was a king of the early 13th dynasty during the late Middle Kingdom. This was about 1,700 years before Christ.
Next to it is the large statue of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai. These are Akhenaten's parents, Tutankhamun's grandfather and grandmother. Between them stands the second eldest daughter, Princess Hatshepsut. She is shown small, but her wig and tight dress show that she was already an adult woman. Fortunately, Queen Tai's body has been preserved. It is located in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, also in Cairo. Look how beautiful her brown-red hair still is. In the large statue of Queen Tai and Amenhotep III what you just saw, you could see that she had her arm around her husband's waist. I'm sure she was a loving woman. Please keep that in mind when you visit the mummies. They were real people who deserve your respect. Their influence on your daily life, to this day, is many times greater than you could imagine. We continue with her son, King Akhenaten, certainly one of the most interesting pharaohs from ancient history.
Yes, Tutankhamun's father was a special man. We could tell you so much about him, but this episode is about the Egyptian Museum, so we'll have to keep it short. It is a misconception that Akhenaten introduced monotheism in Egypt.
What is monotheism?
Monotheism is when there is only one god. Akhenaten did not ban the other gods, but made most gods inactive. The god Aten, the sun god, was now the most important god. He considered the god Aten as king, and together with his wife, Nefertiti, they formed a trinity. Here you see Akhenaten, together with Nefertiti, and their two eldest daughters, Meredaten and Makhedaten, making an offering to Aten.
Of this girl, her name is Meredaten, the eldest daughter of Akhenaten. We have been able to find another image. This comes from the Glyptotek Museum in Copenhagen, Denmark.
When you make such big changes to the gods, you also make enemies. He was hated by many people. They wanted to erase his name from history. Just look at his coffin. They tore off half his face, and they cut out his cartouche with his name.
Striking in Akhenaten, but also in his children, are some strange physical characteristics, including long skulls. We have tried to give you insight into why this was so. There has been such a thing as skull binding since ancient times. This has been observed from China to South America, but Egyptologists reject this. They assume that it must have been Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome is hereditary, but in 2023, during the reconstruction of the face of Tutankhamun, the son of Akhenaten and a concubine known as the Older Lady, it was discovered that he also had a long skull. The author of this article calls it dolichocephaly. As you can see here, nothing is simple when it comes to the distant past. More about Tutankhamun later. Before we close the chapter Akhenaten, we would like to show you something special. Even though it does not come from this museum, but from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Here you can also see two daughters of Akhenaten. Look how beautifully it has been preserved and how intimate both girls were with each other. Look at the smallest girl and see how long her head was. You can also see from the stone that Akhenaten used much smaller stones than his predecessors in order to be able to build as quickly as possible. He used blocks of an average of 21 by 30 centimeters. There is still so much to tell and discover about Akhenaten and his queen. About the famous Amarna letters. Maybe it was the Israelites who gave his generals problems at the borders? Maybe Akhenaten was at the cradle of Christianity? About his art style, about his architecture. We hope that one day, this man will get all the historical honor that is due to him.
This beautifully finished statue is of Nespaka Shuti. He was a scribe and vizier of King Samtek I. He lived around 650 years before Christ. Scribes had a very high position in Egypt. Look! He has a papyrus roll on his lap. His job was to write important documents of the state, but also private documents of the king. But he also noted and maintained the taxes.
Taxes? Even then?
Yes, Jack, even then.
We have arrived at the statue of the Roman Emperor Augustus, also called Octavius. From the time that Egypt was a province of Rome, he was the adopted son of Julius Caesar. Cleopatra also wanted to seduce him, in her hope that Egypt would be spared. At their first meeting, she had letters from her and Julius Caesar clasped between her breasts.
Oaf.
But she could not seduce him. The only thing Octavius would have answered was, "Be calm, good woman. You will not be in danger under me."
She was an extremely intelligent woman, but she was willing to go much further to save Egypt from destruction.
Yes, that's true. You can clearly see the fusion between the Roman and Egyptian styles of statues.
Here is another example of how great they could work the statues into beautiful works of art in the old days. This is Hor. The statue was dedicated to him by his grandson. He lived around 700 years before Christ.
Can you imagine having to make this out of a block of rock-hard stone?
This is the statue of King Djoser, the builder of the first pyramid of mankind. He lived around 2,700 years before Christ. Fortunately, they were able to take a photo of him at that time, so that we can still look at it today.
The statue is in a worse condition, but it is also over 4,700 years old when we make this film. More about Djoser and his pyramid later in this series.
Here we see King Menkaure, the builder of the smallest pyramid of the Giza Plateau.
You can find so many great and small details in this museum. For example, you can see the beautiful wooden statue of a servant with a backpack. His name was Nyankpipaikum. This is the first representation of carrying a backpack in the entire history of mankind.
I am proud to be present in this fantastic museum too. And to start with, I want to show you something interesting. Yes, it is true that I declared myself pharaoh and had myself depicted with a beard. That is part of being a pharaoh. Of course, it was a fake beard. But I never tried to hide that. Just look closely at this statue. Do you see it? I never hide that I was a woman. There have been many statues of me as a pharaoh made over the years. That was part of my status as a pharaoh. But in almost all cases you can find on the back of the statue, Her Majesty herself. I have never concealed the fact that I was a woman. Never. I am proud of it.
Hatshepsut, look, today, 3,500 years after you ruled Egypt in a fantastic way, the young girls of today are drawing your portrait. Maybe you will inspire one of them to become the new Ma'aker of this time. For all the viewers that don't know, Maatker was the throne name of Hatshepsut.
Jack. That would be a dream come true for me.
This is Hatshepsut, depicted as a sphinx with the body of a lion and the head of a king, as a sign of strength. It is made of granite and is one of several that stood in the temple complex at Deir el-Bahri. The 18th dynasty is probably the most famous period of ancient Egypt, with names like Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Hatshepsut. But one man also belongs in this list, Senenmut. Senenmut was of ordinary birth, but held one of the highest ranks under Hatshepsut. He is the architect of many buildings, including the famous temple complex of Hatshepsut in Deir el-Bahri, with the name Djeser-Djeser-U. He managed to transport 2 obelisks by ship from Aswan to Luxor in one go. All these kinds of skills make you important to the pharaoh. But when the pharaoh has your image placed in her most important building, not accessible to the public, behind a door, and entrusts you with the upbringing of her only child, you are certainly very special.
Yes, he meant a lot to me. But for the sake of history and my privacy, I will say no more about it. Hey, what is this? I have never seen this.
You're not supposed to see it, Hatshepsut. It's graffiti, once made by one of the builders of your temple in Deir el-Bahri. It's something about an architect with a female pharaoh. There was a lot of gossip going on in those days about you and Senenmut.
I don't want to talk about it.
Moving on, King Tutankhamun wasn't the only one with a death mask. Look, here are the death masks of a husband and wife, Thuya and Yuya. Remember at the beginning of this episode, we showed that big statue of Akhenaten father and mother? Yuya is the father of Queen Tai, the woman we saw as a mummy with that beautiful hair. The coffin of Queen Amos Meridamen. She lived about 1,550 years before Christ. She was ill and died relatively young. She was buried in 3 coffins. Grave robbers badly damaged the outer coffin. The coffin we see here is the middle coffin. Her tomb was right next to the temple of Hatshepsut. It was found by the American Herbert Winlock, who was looking for remains of statues from the temple of Hatshepsut.
Here we see King Userkaf. He is the founder of the 5th dynasty. He lived around 2,500 years before what you call today Christ. Not much is known about him. He did build one small pyramid near that of Djoser in Saqqara.
We have arrived at the King Tutankhamun exhibition. It is strictly forbidden to film the famous death mask of Tutankhamun. But for our viewers, we have done something special.
Can I tell the viewers, Jack?
Yes.
Dear people, it is unbelievable, but we are now in the tomb of Tutankhamun. We managed to show you something special. Come follow me. We'll have a Valley of the Kings specific episode later in this series, but we'd like to show you something now. Look over there on the left, there's an empty room now. But when Howard Carter first came here, it was full of Tutankhamun's artifacts. Oh look, his coffin. Oh, each beautiful. The burial chamber. This is his final resting place. Look, this is what we wanted to show you. It is at this exact location that Howard Carter found the golden death mask of Tutankhamun. It is modern technology that allows me to speak to you. With the same technology, we can show you this fantastically beautiful object at this location. It's amazing. Many people have seen the golden death mask of Tutankhamun, but few know what the hieroglyphs on the mask say. I will translate it for you. The right eye is the night bark. The left eye is the day bark. The eyebrows are those of the Ennead of the gods. The forehead is that of Anubis. The nape of thy neck is that of Horus. The locks of hair are those of Tasoker. Thou art in front of the Osiris, Tutankhamun. It's so unbelievably beautiful.
Here we see one of the two guards found in Tutankhamun's tomb. Their skirts, sandals, headdresses, pectorals, bracelets, maces, staffs, and on the profile of the eyes and eyebrows are covered with gold leaf. They stood in the antechamber in front of the sealed entrance to the burial chamber. There are so many fantastic, beautiful artifacts found. Just look here. The canopic shrine of Tutankhamun is so beautifully preserved. It was behind Anubis in the treasury room. Look, do you see it? Also in the treasury room they found this Anubis, the protector of the tomb. He stood on a base with poles, which is why it is assumed that he was also used in the funeral procession. Anubis looks to the west, the direction of the afterlife. The Anubis statue was wrapped in a linen shirt which was from the 7th regnal year of the father of Tutankhamun, Pharaoh Akhenaten. Between the legs of Anubis they found this ivory scribe's palette. It has 6 hollow spaces for colored inks and a slot for the pens. The palette bears the name of Meritaten, the oldest daughter of Akhenaten. Do you remember? We saw her before.
I'll tell you a little secret. Not many visitors to the Cairo Museum know this. In the wooden casing where the Anubis rests, there are compartments. The Anubis can be moved, do you see? There are 4 small trays and a large compartment. The small trays contained cult objects like 2 mummiform figures. Figures of Ra and Thoth. A faience papyrus column. And a wax figure of a bird. The large compartment contained jewelry which was wrapped in linen and sealed, but had been disturbed by robbers. Yes, Tutankhamun's tomb was visited by tomb robbers, probably not long after it was closed. But this was discovered at the time, and the tomb was repaired and resealed.
The last thing we want to show you is the fabulously beautiful golden throne of Tutankhamun. Howard Carter found it in the antechamber under a bed. The image on the back of the throne is striking. You see Tutankhamun sitting on the throne and Queen Akhenaten holds a salve cup and spreads perfumed oil on her husband's collar. This scene shows one of the most famous and intimate scenes in art history. We would like to show you another beautiful detail of this throne. Take a good look. It also has folding armrests. This must have been extremely modern and high-tech when Tutankhamun used it. We end this episode on the Egyptian Museum in Cairo with Thuya's beautiful gilded coffin. If you ever come to Egypt, this museum should not be missing from your list. But as said before, it is still unknown what role this museum will have next to the Grand Egyptian Museum near the pyramids. So keep an eye on this.
Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this episode, please click on thumbs up below. That way other people can find us better. There will be more episodes where we will do our best to inform you about a beautiful period of Egypt. Thank you.